Hello, welcome to the Rooted Souls podcast. My name is Becca and I will be your hostess. Here I am offering you talks on spirituality and self-development that bring you back down to earth, bridging the gap between ethereal ideas and mindful realism. These talks illuminate the magic in the mundane and facilitate discernment in the far out for a life rooted in wisdom. This podcast is for conscious seekers who are just opening up to spirituality and personal growth, or those of you who've been on that journey for a while and you're realizing that things just are not what they seemed at first, or for those who are anywhere in between. I am so glad you're here. I invite you to either take a walk or sit down and relax with something nice and warm to drink, and just let this wash over you. Take what resonates, leave the rest, and just know that this is my gift to you. I hope that it serves you. I am so glad you're here, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hi, today I have Lyzz Zinn joining me. We are going to be talking about the power of music. Lyzz is a musician, lover of music, and owner of Elle Zee Music Teaching Studio. Music has been Lyzz's primary mode of expression since she can remember, making sound. It is how she found her voice, the way she expresses her identity, and the medium she uses to share her unique story. She seeks to help others explore their stories musically, to let music inspire and spur creativity the way it has for her. She's currently a music educator, performer, and rising music therapist with a degree from Berklee College of Music in Songwriting and a degree in philosophy from Suffolk University. She's currently working toward a dual master's degree in mental health counseling and music therapy, and working as a music therapy intern with elementary school children. At the end of the conversation, we'll talk a little bit about the current work she's doing and how you can reach her. She is a great friend of mine, a great woman, and I'm so excited to ask her questions about music and pick her brain because it's definitely not one of my expertise. However, I have known about shamanism for quite some time and am well versed in the power of sound for healing. So I can't wait to dig in with you, Lyzz. Welcome.
Thanks, Becca. Glad to be here.
So my first question for you, Lyzz, is can you define music? You know, when we were titling this talk, I originally was going to mention music and sound. And when you suggested music, I decided to look it up because I actually didn't know the definition of music. And I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, so we talked about possibly titling this The Power of Music and The Power of Sound, and they do go together, right? So the basic definition of music is, I guess, organized sound. Like we talked about, we think of music as like a composed piece of something, sound. So there's all these different sort of musical elements, melody, harmony, rhythm, volume, all that kind of stuff. So music is like taking all those musical elements and organizing them in some way. And it might be in a composed structure that can be recorded, written down, and repeated, or it could be improvisatory, right? Like music right now, I could just go ba-da-da-da-da, and that's music. I organized it somehow, I guess. But yeah, so that's the basic definition of music.
Well, now I'm tempted to just get you to make sound for us for the rest of the time, but I will stay on track. So what drew you to music? It sounds like, you know, you were just making sounds when you were a kid. When did you realize that it was a passion of yours, and how did it impact you?
This is a good question that could have a very long answer. Yeah, so I mentioned, you know, you read my bio, talked about how it's been this sort of primary mode of expression for me. I always remember singing. I always remember playing instruments. My mom was a piano player, and so she taught me when I was really young, and I just always wanted to learn more instruments. I ended up playing like violin and saxophone and piano and guitar and ukulele and all this stuff, and just like loved having music in my life. Just something I was always really drawn to. I think primarily the therapeutic aspects of music I became more aware of them. Later on in life, I had, all throughout my childhood, been really connected to music. I went through like a series of traumatic events, and I was really disconnected. I say like divorced from music for a while, just not playing at all. Um, and when, I ended up getting through some of those things. So one in particular was a abusive relationship, and after escaping from that relationship, I had like all of these poems and songs and things just like floating around my head all the time. And I really like got back in touch with music. And I say it's something that helped me to find my voice, because I think my voice, my like identity and who I am was really shut down for a long time. And through music and through songwriting, I was able to find it again and have it out in the world again for me and other people to hear. And it was a way to share who I am. And, I studied songwriting at Berklee because I loved how therapeutic songwriting was for me. And as I went through that program, I realized it was less about like, okay, creating songs and marketing them. For me, it was like, oh, I want to share the power of songwriting. I want to share the power of music and what it did for me with other people, which led me to music therapy, which we'll talk about more what that is later, I'm sure. Yeah, that's the summary. Short story. Do you have any more questions, Becca? You can ask me.
I have plenty. The next one that pops into my mind is that I find that therapy can be quite clinical and analytical. And I am curious about how music can bring spirituality into the therapeutic space and really assist people in getting in touch with parts of themselves that they can't get to through conversation.
Yeah, so one of the main draws towards music therapy and other expressive arts therapies is that nonverbal piece, right? Because talk therapy, you can have conversations and they can be really powerful conversations, but it's like one part of the brain that we're accessing while we're talking. And doing things like using music in therapy, it just really taps into that sort of, I guess, subconscious, for a lack of a better word, that those layers underneath, like what we're able to maybe verbalize or express, yeah, through speech. So in terms of spirituality, we talk in music therapy about like how everybody has like a musical self. There's like the music child that's like deep within everybody. That's like, it's akin to sort of like self energy, like your highest self energy that you're tapping into, that's like free and playful and creative and expressive. Um, and that's what we're looking for. Music therapy is used a lot with clients who have um, verbal disabilities, linguistic disabilities, so like are nonverbal, um, or just with people who have a hard time accessing feelings through speech or like talking about things. Um, and that musical self can come out, like it can provide this opportunity for people to connect just in this musical world in a way that they're not able to express themselves otherwise. So it's just another way to connect into this deeper self, right? And music therapy today, it's this modern profession. It's been more of like a formalized occupation since the 40s, 50s, 60s. But music's been used in healing practices forever. Music is a part of every culture, every religion. It's like ancient. We find musical instruments dug up from thousands and thousands of years ago. It's a big part of shamanism, which is, a huge spiritual healing practice that's way outdates current music therapy. And what music therapists do is not shamanism, but some of the practices are connected in that, like, music can be utilized, the voice is utilized, rhythm is utilized, drumming is utilized. So yeah, just really tapping into the part that we're not necessarily expressing verbally or consciously all the time. I think that answered it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And right now, as I look outside and I can hear it, the rain is pouring down. And I think about how, people react differently to rain. Some people feel depressed when it rains. Some people feel invigorated. Other people feel soothed. Sometimes people see it as an invitation to slow down and they don't let themselves slow down on sunny days. So there's like a range of emotion that occurs from the sound of rain, from the sight of rain. And it just, gets me curious about what kind of instruments or what kind of tempos, if that, I don't even know what that really means. I think it has to do with beat and pace. But again, you're the expert. What kind of, frequencies, et cetera. And, I'm actually really curious to ask you about sound frequencies, but, when you're working with somebody with sound and maybe not so much song, can you tell us a little bit about if there's any sort of system or reference point for what different sounds can do to somebody else? And the reason I started it with the rain is because obviously everybody's different, but I'm just so curious if there's a philosophy or any information around what kind of sounds are used for what.
Yeah. Yes and no. So, you're made a very astute observation about the rain and how people react differently to rain, the sound of rain or the experience of rain or the darkness outside. And it's the same with music. Like, you could take a song and play it for a group of people, and each person is going to have a different relationship with that song. And, even if it's not a song, even if it is just a sound, like, people are going to associate sounds with different things. It depends on their experience of the world, how they've interacted with sounds like that before. Typically, we have instruments that make softer sounds. We have instruments that make louder sounds, right? So, like, think about, I wish I had one near me I could play into the microphone, but like an egg shaker, right? It's a soft, sort of more gentle sound. Or like we have a rain stick, which might make kind of a more soothing sound. Or, then there's like big drums, which you can bang on. And like we can often use those to help people to sort of get out some energy, express some anger. That's, maybe a more typical association, but for some people, no. It's going to depend on the person. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers the question, but it's
Yeah.
definitely
Well,
an individualized experience.
the conversation's definitely going somewhere, right? So when I think of shamanism, sound and healing, I think of drums. I think of
Yeah.
beats. When I think of beats, I think of binaural beats. When then I start thinking about the digital sound. But over the decades, when I've worked with shamans or healers and it's come to sound, it's either been tuning forks, drums, chimes, people's vocalizations, chanting, those sorts of things. And I've definitely noticed the biggest impacts when I'm chanting or I am humming, the frequency within my body, almost like a cat purring. Definitely the vibration has immense impact on the body and the mind.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that up, actually. So, okay, let's sort these into things. Drumming, yes, often used in shamanistic practices, also used in music therapy. Let's talk about, why would I want to use a drum or like have a percussion circle in music therapy? The drum goes back to like rhythm, and like, okay, what's the first rhythm we're hearing? It's a heartbeat, like
Heartbeat.
within the womb. So rhythm, and that steady rhythm, the regular rhythm, it indicates to a baby, this is like the science right behind it, not necessarily spiritual, but it's all connected. So
I want to
the
hear
science behind
everything,
it.
science and
Yeah.
spiritual. Bring it on.
So, when we're in our mother's wombs, we're hearing heartbeat, and there's a regular rhythm to it. There's a regular rhythm associated with, like, okay, are we getting food? Are we getting air? Are we getting the things that we need? So rhythm, and a steady rhythm in particular, is likely to be very soothing, grounding. We use the word entrainment. So, like in a group, if we're all playing in a rhythm together, we're all connecting to each other through playing this rhythm, being on the same wavelength, if you will, being in that same musical space. in a way that's different than like we talked about before when you're just having a conversation in a room. It's like this really felt sense that maybe not consciously understood in the moment, but definitely felt. It's this palpable sense of connection, rhythm. So, often I'm not super well versed in shamanistic practices. I don't want to claim to be an expert there. I'm not, but I do know that in drumming circles and from what I know historically about different cultures that have used percussion in healing rituals, it's about this like group participation and regulation and grounding and releasing, louder expression is going to release some more energy than like, a quiet tapping, right? Or just humming like we talked about. So what else is like really common throughout cultures? Lullaby. It's in every culture. A mother singing, humming, vocalizing softly to a child to soothe them. It's everywhere. And you talked about, even like humming to yourself, like we call, I have a mentor who calls humming like a bone massage, right? So,
I
maybe you
love
want to,
that.
yeah. So maybe, okay, let's take a minute and like just hum, right? So in a deep breath.
Mm.
Right. So the point is not to sound beautiful, just to like have this internalized experience. And humming, your mouth is closed. It's not necessarily meant to project out. People hum to themselves all the time as this sort of just like soothing thing. I'll like hum to myself while I'm getting work done, as like and yeah, I the reason I'm hesitant to saying like pick a certain frequency. Sure, there's like research and sound healing behind like which frequencies. I'm less studied in that and I'm more into the idea of like, okay, pick what feels good to you right now. And whatever feels good to you is probably what you need, right? So
So the healing frequencies is not pseudoscience.
healing frequencies, I wouldn't call it pseudoscience. I wouldn't. Um, I do think I'm going to go back again to the individualized uh, philosophy principle that, sometimes like you could play one frequency for a person and it's going to be really jarring and throw them off, and it's going to be soothing for another person. There is some science behind like, okay, like let's go back to like lullaby, being in the womb, being an infant type of thing. The higher pitches, right? Like that's what like babies' ears can tune into. So often, like it's why people will talk to babies like this, right?
Aha.
Right. So those higher frequencies, like they can sometimes feel more comforting or soothing, familiar, like garner more connection to an infant. So then like we've all been infants, we've all had that experience. So we grow up and we hear like, ah, it's different than hearing, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, but so there is some stuff behind the like the higher frequencies, lower frequencies. I don't know all the science behind it. That's what I do know, and that's as much as I know to say sound frequency wouldn't be pseudoscience
That
in
makes
my
so
opinion.
much sense. I'm glad
Yeah.
you mentioned that. All right.
Yes. So I know there's also, like frequencies associated with each chakra, and that's why, tuning forks can be used, sound bowls can be used. Um, and again, it's like I haven't read a lot of studies behind that stuff, but I have talked to enough people and had enough experience to say like there's something powerful in there, and that's good enough for me. So, yeah. All right. Did I
So
touch on everything you had asked about or mentioned before?
I think so. And as you were talking about the drumming, I actually, you're talking about how visceral it is. I actually tuned back into memories of when I was in drum circles, when I was in ceremony, and I felt that sensation in my body. I felt calm as you were even just talking about it. So it makes me wonder how similar it is to scent. jogging back memory with the olfactory nerve, and if it also taps into that part of the brain, because just even thinking about drumming calmed me down.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know about the brain science behind all of it, but it's all sensory, right? You know, the expressive arts therapies in particular, it's like very rooted in sensory kinesthetic, all of that kind of experience, which is like how we go through the world. And you know, it's the main way we go through the world when we're very young and not speaking, and we just don't really remember that. And the more we age and like learn to use language and things, the less we have a connection to like just being in the world and being in that sensory experience. um and that creates this real sort of disconnect, I think, from our bodies and our minds. It's that like brain body split that just happens in Western culture. So, you know, like back to your question about how is music used in therapy when therapy is this sort of clinical cognitive talking. It's a lot of like, okay, we're getting back to this really root sensory experience where we can just, you know, babble like blah ba da ba da ba da ba da, or drum boom boom boom, right? Or you know, just have an instrument in our hand and see what does it feel like to hold it, what does it feel like to play it, what does it feel like, that resonance in our bodies. And it creates that connection that's like so cut off in modern world.
So
Yeah.
when I'm working with clients around felt sense and somatic experiencing, especially if trauma is the topic, which it often is, getting people out of their thoughts and into their body helps to transmute the trauma and heal at a really subconscious level. So my sense is that in a music therapy session, you're kind of offering the same kind of process. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you start working with a client and then how the sessions progress as they become more versed in these techniques?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the client. My experience in music therapy has mainly been with children. Um, and this will be true for other clients as well, but definitely with children, it's a lot of just like, okay, like noticing where they're at and following them. Teach, like, some of it is like teaching them how to use music in their lives, whether it's listening to music, writing music. It's just encouraging this sort of like free creative expression, right? So often, um depending on the goals of the client I'm working with, um you know, our sessions start with like a hello song, some familiar sort of structure where we can like sing together and just like say hello and check in and say how we're feeling. Often followed by some sort of like warm up, right? Often it's like the rhythmic entrainment that I talked about. We'll do a drum, a percussion circle type thing. We'll like improvise some music together just to get people connected to their bodies, holding something in their hands, playing, feeling the resonance from the music we're making, having a collaborative relational experience in the music. And then it's moving into like some other kind of activity based on, you know, checking in with the client's energy levels and seeing like, okay, do we want to modulate this? Do we not, you know, that we want to work with it? Do we want to talk about it? Do less talking. We limit the talking usually. Um, but yeah, so it's again, it's sort of, it's going to be different depending on the session. Um, but we think about these sort of energetic arcs that we can uh, use music to create, right? So there's often like a, okay, we're meeting a client where they're at, we're meeting someone, where is their energy level, checking in, connecting to it and working with it. So maybe they need, you know, some calming that day. The arc usually goes, you know, no one can see me, but like up and down. So we want to like warm up a little bit, process some stuff, do some more active activities around something, cool down using some sort of like, there's different techniques, like sometimes it's chanting, sometimes it's like using a sort of like calming music app that just plays really sort of soft sounds, and you can like press on the screen and it just makes like, it's called Bloom. If anyone wants it, look it up. Not a sponsor, but I like it. So, um, or like, you know, dancing with scarves, movement and music goes together really nicely. So, just kind of, that kind of stuff. And then some kind of closure with a goodbye song or chant. Or I have a client that uses like pulse checks, pulse check in, pulse check out. So we each like take a turn playing something on a drum that represents how we're feeling. Yeah.
I love this. It's so interesting to me. I love to dance, especially if I'm feeling stressed or anxious or I need to move through something. So I'm always encouraging people to dance daily as a source of health maintenance. And I'm curious what you could offer our listeners in terms of things they can do at home to support their own expression and mental health. Do you have any? I love the app suggestion. Do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah.
For these guys?
Yeah. Thinking about like, okay, your listener base and these spiritual seekers. I'll give a few examples and feel free to pick out ones that might work. Yeah. So we talked a lot about like this somatic element of music and movement. I have it's a fairly regular, sometimes irregular practice of, I try each morning to like really just in some way like move my body, right? Tap into my breath. And one thing that we're told to do in society is like be quiet a lot of the time, right? So, our bodies like naturally make sounds, right? And we talked about music as organized sound. But our we as beings, we make sounds, like we are musical in that way. So we're told to like quiet those sounds a lot. So not quieting those sounds, like letting your body have a voice. Because when we add voice to our movements or add voice to our breath, like there's more release happening. There's more things that need to come out. So like, when you're like angry, you want to scream, right? Your voice gets louder, your voice gets higher. When you're tired, like it might just not want to come out. It's softer, needs a little bit more soothing. Crying is accompanied by sound most of the time, often, right? So our bodies like need to make these sounds. It's also a way of just like validating that we are in this world, right? So we get this like feedback through sound or through just resonance, right? Sound is vibration. So even if you're not able to hear, like they are felt. Anyway, so like wake up in the morning, take a deep breath. Let whatever sound needs to come out, come out. Something's there, right? So just doing that a few times while you're stretching even. Yeah. And then you can like really focus the sound. Like if you're thinking of something you really want to let go of that day. Okay, so maybe there's like, or from the week, stress from the week. It could be in the morning, it could be after work or after a long day. Thinking about that thing, breathing in, and just like making some movement. So right now I'm like holding some orb in my hand, or and then, all right, I'm facing a window. So taking that deep breath in, thinking about what I want to let go, and then letting it go by moving my hands and making a sound. So, right? Let it go. And see how you feel afterwards. Right now, I feel a little lighter. I feel a little silly, but
I'm loving this.
that's one thing. Letting sound move through your body. And that's hard for people in public to do, but like if you're just by yourself, like in your bedroom in the morning, just let it out. See what happens. Like remind yourself that you're alive, right? Um so there's that kind of thing. If you have instruments available, you can utilize those, but you also like don't need to have instruments. There's this common misconception in music therapy that like you need to know how to play an instrument to do it. You need to be like quote unquote like a trained and good singer to sing. Like, no. Like music has become so commercialized in our culture, and it's really like taken it away from who it belongs to, which is everybody. We're musical beings by nature, right? We all have heartbeats. We all make sound. So like tapping into like what is your musical being? Who am I musically? And you can use your body. We call this body percussion: clapping, snapping, tapping your heart, tapping your legs. There's like energetic tapping it's another practice, and it's often used for like trauma release or stress release, that kind of thing. So you can just like tap on your body. We talked about like regular rhythms being grounding and soothing. You can turn on music in the background and like uh tap along on your body to it. Like you can be your own drum, right? One practice that I've learned, and glad I'm remembering it now because it's been so helpful to me, is like I've really gotten into like turning on music without lyrics and just really connecting to the music instead of the words, like again getting out of that cognitive and into the more somatic felt sense. um so I've done things where I like really, after breathing and getting connected to my body and like feeling like where it is I'm at, and maybe a sense of like what it is I'm seeking or needing that day, like going into Spotify and like finding a list of random like instrumental music or of something, playing like 10 seconds of each song that comes up until I find one that really like matches, that I'm really connecting with. And you'll know that because we have we all have intuition. We all can sense that. So you'll know that. So whatever feels right, turn that on and play it through a few times. You can draw to it, do some kind of like art form to it. You can move to it too. Often I'll find like after playing it through a few times and keeping it going, like I will just naturally be inclined to start moving in some way, or singing along, humming along. I do have instruments, so sometimes it's like drumming along or playing a tambourine, but that again could be like body percussion. Listen to your body. Like, no, just your body will know. Your body will know what it wants. Sometimes it does lead to writing too in a more cognitive process, but it's going to depend. Um, so yeah, so there's like letting sound happen. There's like really connecting with sound that you're choosing and experiencing through recorded music. Um, those are two things that I've found very powerful. Um, Last thing I guess is like more deliberate sound making. So we talked about like just breathing and letting the sound happen, and then like using sound as a release. There's also just like we talked about like the bone massage and the cat purr, right? So those frequencies being soothing, cats do purr to soothe themselves. Like they use sound deliberately. So we can do that too, right? So you can, we have to breathe in order to sing, and breathing is very regulating on its own when we tap into it and let it happen. And often we like don't breathe and don't realize that. And it's this like great personal source of so many things: life, resilience, uh, grounding, soothing. So taking in a deep breath, and I have the same mentor advisor who has talked about the humming as a bone massage also taught me this sort of visualization as your breath as a river, right? It's always going to flow, and you let your breath out and it's going to come back in. It's just going to keep flowing. And then you can think about any tone, any part, any your voice as this like leaf or canoe that's just floating down the river and just letting out a sound. So maybe it's a hum. Maybe you start humming. And just like let that leaf float down the river until your next breath. Then maybe you want to like open your mouth a little bit and it'll become And then just play around with like any syllable or sound that you want to make that day. I usually feel pretty good after I do that. But yeah, experiment with some of those things. You can do this with music in the background or not. Um, yeah, just let yourself like connect to your own inner music. And then if you're listening to music, you can connect to that too. And it's this like, I did a presentation about um, using music for wellness at a high school this week. And I asked for examples of how music is powerful. And one of the high schoolers said, like, if you're alone, you can turn on some music and then you're not so alone anymore. And I was like, that's beautiful.
That really is beautiful.
Yeah.
All of these suggestions that you just offered to us today are fantastic. I love them so much. And there's a few things that stuck out to me. One is the breath, right? We do not breathe nearly enough. And oftentimes, if you ask somebody how they're breathing, they're holding their breath. And so breath work is so important. And I can see how movement and rhythm assist in developing a deeper relationship to the breath. And I really appreciated how you said that your morning routine is inconsistent, because I find that too much rigidity actually can set people back. And the same with, what do I want to listen to today? Or what instrument is more catered to the mood I'm in? Every morning is going to be different. So giving yourself the freedom to be inconsistent with your routines, I think, is part of the medicine.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about taking up space, I love this piece, because I don't know if you notice, but I hear people apologize for themselves all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Apologize for passing you on the street. Apologize for crying. Even if you're a paid client, just apology, apology, apology. So what I love about what you've been describing is taking up more space. And coined with that, celebrating what so many people consider the inner child. But for me, I feel so strongly that we label these playful sides of ourselves our inner child, when our healed adult can also be super playful. So I love how the techniques and modalities you've talked about today can both tap into the inner child for healing, allow the inner child to play, but also get the adult on board for making it part of a consistency of routine, of integrating movement for play, for healing, for self-expression, and for taking up space. I can see just on so many levels how this is so helpful. And I loved every suggestion you gave us, because you don't need anything. A lot of people already have some of these resources, and it's little habits that we can do every day that make massive impact.
100%. Yeah. You want to relate to the spirituality of things, like, okay, breath in in like Indian spirituality is prana, or in yogic practices is prana, is life force, and it's what is enabling us to move. It's what's enabling us to vocalize. Yeah, make a sound. It's important. And even if you want to just think metaphorically, I know in groups of when I've played in music groups, particularly in like we do like there, it's not me being involved in music therapy, but in my music therapy courses, if I'm like with a group of music therapists and we're making music, each person, each instrument, even if we're all playing the same instruments, the music we're making is a reflection of our inner music, right? And you can learn a lot about yourself through the way that you're inclined to make music, especially in a group. And I've done things where, I'm in a group of people playing music, and each part that each person is playing, often it's just improvised. It's not that we're playing and reading a pre-composed piece of music. It's adding something to the experience. So I've dropped out and seen how is the music changing when I'm not making sound. how is the music changing when this person's not making sound? And it changes, right? So I'm gonna, again, just encourage everybody to use their voices, express their inner music, because it's important, right? So do it. Do it. Because when we're not, it's changing something. And like we said, each morning's going to be different. Each day is going to be different. Tune into what it is that day is. Like, we even use the words tune in, and that's a very musical way of speaking, right? So tune into what that day is, and like tune into what you want to add to that day.
Yeah, I love this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So this was so wonderful to hear all your insight. I feel like I got something out of this today.
Good.
If people want to reach you or learn more about you or learn more about music therapy or find a music therapist, how can we all do that?
Yeah. I have a website. It's www.ellzee.net. ELLEZEE. So like phonetic spelling. It's my website. Then I have Instagram too, Elle Zee Music. That's me. Music therapist. To find a music therapist, all music therapists are credentialed, right? We're board certified. Go through 1,200 hours of clinical training and coursework and things. So there's a database, like our organization's called the AMTA, American Music Therapy Association. So music therapists will register there if you wanted to find one in your area. I believe they have a database you can search. And yeah, music therapists, we do all kinds of different things. So we might be, there are people in private practice that you can just sort of contract with for your individual needs. There's people, I work in a school. There's people in hospitals just all over the place. So we are a growing profession. So yeah, if you're interested or have any more questions about what it is that a music therapist can do, you can ask me, or you can go on the AMTA website. There's lots of information there too.
And I will link to those in the episode summary. Lyzz, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all the wisdom you've got. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for asking me.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you for listening and becoming part of this community. If you loved this episode, I invite you to subscribe, share with someone you think would appreciate it, or leave a review. This helps me to learn what resonates with you so I can deliver more of what you want and reach more people who can benefit from this content. If you want to reach me, please feel free to reach out on my website, www.beccaspirit.com. I would love to hear from you, get any feedback, and know what's on your mind. Until next time, take great care.